Well, hi, everybody. So good to see you all here at this wonderful event. I hope you're enjoying yourselves and make your way over to the Moderna booth. Uh, I'm Kate Cronin. I'm the Chief Brand Officer of Moderna, and I'm super excited here to talk to our panelists here today about being a change maker. First, I want to introduce Kathryn Finney to my left, and Kathryn is a serial entrepreneur and investor. She is the founder and managing general partner of Genius Guild. This is a Chicago-based venture fund that invests in scalable businesses led by Black founders using innovation to build and promote healthy communities. A Yale-trained epidemiologist, Kathryn founded Digital Undivided after selling her media company, The Budget Fashionista. So she's like a scientist and a fashionista and a venture capitalist, so it's kind of amazing.
The flyest person in the lab. Totally.
Always. Get that lab coat off and put something else on. She is also, her new book, Build the Damn Thing, How to Start a Successful Business If You're Not a Rich White Guy, launched in June of 2022 and made the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list in the first week of release. So congratulations to you, Kathryn. Super exciting. And we're really happy to chat with you on the panel today. And dressed in beautiful yellow, fashionista herself, Jacqueline Jones is the head of strategic partnerships for LinkedIn Global Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging team, which is a role she created herself. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because I think it's super interesting that she invented this role. Jacqueline cultivates relationships with organizations and companies that share their focus on creating diverse and inclusive workplaces across the globe. And LinkedIn actually is a partner ecosystem that has grown to more than 45 participating partners and followed by over 1.5 million LinkedIn members. And we had a sidebar discussion before we got here and talking about how we can create more diversity and inclusion at Moderna, and we're going to talk a little bit about the health space as well. So Jacqueline has created that role and that community. But by providing key insights into the needs of communities, collaborating with partner organizations that have been significant to LinkedIn's mission to provide economic access to every member of the global workforce, she's also led the DIBS team and contributes to the core team for LinkedIn's equity strategy, Center for Global Impact, and steering committee for our diversity supplier network. Now, I normally don't read all of this stuff, but these two women have so much going for them that I literally I couldn't memorize it all. This is really amazing stuff that they're both doing. And they also know each other, so I thought maybe you two could just share a little story, maybe Kathryn kick it off, or actually Jacqueline kick it off, because you just mentioned how you met and how Kathryn was kind of a mentor to you. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, and thank you for your generous introduction. And I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for everyone for being here and listening to us go through and talk about our experiences. And at the end of this, we want to make sure that everyone in here sees themselves as that spark, right? So how I met Kathryn, I would not have even fathomed being on the stage with her at this point in time. Actually was introduced to her by a mutual friend about 12 years ago who we said, this is like Morpheus. She calls up and she gives you an instruction. She said, you need to meet this woman and you need to fly to New York and see her. So I did. And long story short, she invited me to the White House. She won't tell you this, but she got honored by the White House for being a change maker in the field of essentially just opening up more access to tech for many different populations. And I sat there in this room, which all of you have seen on TV, is the press room. And Valerie Jarrett gets up at the front. I'm like, oh my God, this is legit, right? And you know, her mom, her partner, and her business partner's there, and me, right? And then I'm like, oh my God, I have to pay attention because this is super important. Long story short, I listened to what she had to say, and I got inspired to make an impact in this field. Because it's so important that 50% of the United States is represented, as technology drives so much of what we do now, that we're developing systems that work for everyone. So thank you, Kathryn.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, as human beings, You want to know that your time on this earth mattered, that your presence here somehow moved us forward in a meaningful way, whatever way that is. And I just want to thank, I call her Jackie. She's Jacqueline to everyone else. But I want to thank Jackie for sharing that, because I think it's so life affirming to hear that your presence mattered to someone and it impacted them positively, especially in the world that we live in right now, where we don't necessarily have a lot of positivity and positivity being shared and generosity towards each other. And I just really want to thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
That means a lot to me. Thank you.
And by the way, Kate, she had no idea we had this connection at all.
I know. I was like, you have to tell this story because it's really cool. And I also think that a change maker, you see the definition up there, a person who desires change in the world. It also is a person who creates change for others. And if you think about your role as a change maker, sometimes you impact someone's lives in ways that you never thought you would or even realized. And so change makers create more change makers. So the two of you are a great representative example of that. And so thank you for sharing the story. But let's get into kind of the overall gist of the panel discussion. I'm going to talk just for a second about Moderna. How many of you are Moderna vaccine? Oh, yeah.
It's Moderna.
Moderna.
How many are Moderna?
I like it. The Moderna. It's a new verb.
New verb.
New verb. So you've been Moderna. So I think the fantastic story about Moderna is this is a company that was studying mRNA technology. And basically, it's an information molecule that goes into your body and teaches your body how to fight disease or prevent disease. And that's the simplest term of what mRNA is. But we've been studying this technology for 10 years. And when the pandemic hit, and we have a rock star in the audience, Hamilton Bennett, who was a part of this whole pandemic team, but basically able to take what normally is a technology that takes, vaccines normally take a couple of years to create at least and get to the market. We're able to turn that around within a matter of 6 months. And I think that's really what a change maker is really thinking about being unconventional. Don't think just about what works, but think about what must we do. And the world was waiting, and Moderna answered that call. And I think it was because you have to think like a change maker, and that's what Moderna did. So highly unique situation. And that's why I joined Moderna, because the company is filled with change makers and people who think beyond convention. And so that's why I'm excited to talk to the two of you, because you have both demonstrated, both in your personal lives and your career, that change making actually creates new opportunities and exciting opportunities for you. So I want to start off talking a little bit about this idea of a platform company and a platform and creating change within your platform. And maybe, Kathryn, you can kick it off with a little bit about the pandemic and how that really accelerated your VC fund and kind of what that did for you. So the pandemic was horrible and awful, but it also created some opportunities in terms of the world that we live in.
Yeah, at the time, when the pandemic happened, I was the CEO of an organization called Digital Undivided that I had founded after selling my company. And the whole idea of Digital Undivided was to create pathways for talented, particularly Black and Latinx women who were creating startups into the startup ecosystem. And so we partner with all these great folks. If you remember, if we want to think back to 2020, I don't think many of us do, but in March 2020, business was open one day and then it was literally not open. It was like the next day, everything shut down. And there was a bit of a panic. And so we had a number of companies in our portfolio that were really suffering. They weren't able to access the PPP loans, right? At that time, you had to have a private banker in order to get the PPP loans. So I had authorized this sort of quick infusion of cash and just saw how it impacted the business operations of these companies, but not just the business, like the mental health, because a lot of the companies were really reeling of like, what are we going to do? Business has completely shut down and we had no contingency plan for this. The irony of it is 3 years later, a lot of the venture world and the startup community is going through a similar thing where things literally shut down in like a 3-day time period and everyone is trying to figure out what to do. that may have been a plus of the pandemic, is that we went through this before. So we kind of know how to manage it a little bit better than we did at that time. And so I was scheduled to go on a vacation with my family. We were going to go to Alaska, leaving from Seattle in April of 2020. If we remember back, Seattle was the epicenter of the pandemic in April 2020. I do not think that cruise ship has left to this day. And so I took that money and I needed to do something. I'm a type of person that when I feel stressed or helpless or, like I can't do something, I feel like I have to do something for someone else that helps me come out of myself. And so I started a fund named after my grandmother, Kathryn Dooney Hale. I did not know I was named after her until I was 12. I just called her Dooney like everyone else. And authorized 100 small micro grants to other Black women founders like myself. And it was literally like, here's $100. I don't care what you do with it, as long as you do something that helps you continue on. And I, as this person who had reached a certain level, I want you to know that I see you and that I care about you and you matter and what you're doing is important to everyone. And the impact of that literally changed my life in so many ways. And so coming out of that, as an epidemiologist, knowing that we were going to be in the pandemic for a while, as someone who is in the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, knowing that everyone was going to be deeply impacted in profound ways, the ability to do something and to see the response. There was one person who I met, and we call them Doonies all the time, who said, an email you sent me in 2020 in which you said, I see you and keep on doing what you need to do. This person subsequently is running an 8-figure in revenue company 3 years later. But at that time, she's like, I didn't know, I literally couldn't get out of bed. I did not know what I was going to do. And I taped your email above my desk. And now we have offices, and that email is framed in my office to just remind, like, someone saw me at that moment. And I mean, we were both in tears because I'm like, thank you so much for like sharing that with me. And so, but that ability to move capital and to be an allocator, and particularly coming from communities where we don't necessarily have access to capital, or if we do, we're not necessarily decision makers in terms of what happens with it, and seeing how powerful that was really led me to create my venture fund, because I want to invest in people like me. I know people like me. I have domain experience, and wanted to invest in exceptional founders who are building companies. But it was really out of that crisis of the pandemic that opportunity came. And so I really want to encourage all of us who are in the startup ecosystem right now, we are in the middle of a crisis, to also be able to see the opportunities that will come out of this, and to stay a bit positive, because we will get out of this. We will come out of this. It's going to be painful, but we will come out of this. And so how do we come out differently? What are some opportunities? What are the new genius skills that can be created as a result of where we're at?
I love that. Thank you for sharing your learnings. It's really helpful. Jacqueline,
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about giving minority voices through LinkedIn and the pandemic? A little bit there, please.
Yeah, no, this is great. I love Kathryn's story because it's around looking for those opportunities, right? So can everyone hear me? First of all, I just want to make sure. Awesome. So during the pandemic, I'll just start there. So just to provide you some context on my role, I lead about 45 partners right now that reach about 1.5 million people at LinkedIn. Within that, at LinkedIn, just to give you some context on the network, the reach of the network, so we reach around 900 million members, about 50 million companies in about 200 countries around the world. And during the pandemic, our network was such a key way for companies to even reach customers, reach communities, communicate, connect with people. The followership of our partners went up by almost 70% during the pandemic, just in terms of people being more aware of social issues, but also just being able to conduct business and to connect. And to Kathryn's point around being able to connect with people and to make sure that folks have a voice and be able to speak. I mean, I remember one of our partners, AdColor, for instance, went completely virtual that first year, like everyone did. And a beautiful thing about LinkedIn, especially for diverse voices, which sometimes we've been accustomed to being invisible or not being seen, is that you can now be seen on a platform which has 900 million people. So specifically during the pandemic, one of the presentations with AdColor wanted us to come on stage to talk about how to develop your voice and brand on the platform. We had 32,000 people tune into that one session. And to Kathryn's point, to this day, I still receive notes from people how just that training about how to be seen on the platform, how to connect. At the time, community was so vital, how to get your products out, how to transact, actually saved lives and businesses. So to this day, I'm really, really proud of that.
And to piggyback on something that Jackie said, the importance of community. I think when you're in these periods of like great change and periods where there's great uncertainty, that's where community becomes so important. And however you define community, it could be people that share your gender, your race, it could be people who share your religion, it could be, or your beliefs, it could be people who share a hobby. I have a friend who is going through some moments last week, and he was like, I went out with my group of friends and we like skateboard. I mean, he's like 45. I'm like, are you sure about that? Because you fall down. But he was like, we skateboard. And it's just this community of, folks, and we get together and get on skateboards and skate around. And it's, that's so beautiful because you're in this period of uncertainty. And it's that community is what will give you the foundation. It's really, I put faith in people. I don't put faith in systems or industries or things like that. I put faith in people, and especially good people, because I've seen what happens when we come together as communities. As I've seen what happens when we're able to connect with each other as human beings. And I've seen the power of that to pull us out of like really amazingly hard, difficult problems. So what Jackie's doing at LinkedIn and creating communities, the things that I still try to do in my work and creating communities, I think is so vitally important where we're at right now.
We talked a bit about this, about wellness.
Yeah.
And there is literally an issue with mental health around the world. It is a pandemic of mental health crisis. And I do think in order to do your best and be a change maker and show up, having those communities and creating that ecosystem, whether it be virtual or at work or at home or wherever, is super important. And I think leaning in on that, and also as leaders, making sure that your teams have what they need to be successful. So we talked a bit about that as well. I'm curious, Jacqueline, can you share a little bit more about what you're seeing on the LinkedIn platform when it comes to the communities of color? What are they looking for? What can we as organizations do? Because we talked about how Moderna, we need to look like the patients we serve, and we don't. And we have a huge crisis in STEM in terms of getting diversity and inclusion, and it's just a challenge. So can you share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I read a post on LinkedIn about 2 weeks ago from the CEO of Procter & Gamble, right, who posted that in the last 10 years, the growth in the U.S. population, almost 100% of the growth in the U.S. population has come from BIPOC communities, mixed race, communities of color, right? So in the last 10 years, all of the growth in the United States has come from those populations, right? And the fact that multicultural marketing is now marketing, period. Just period, right? So to your point of, having to construct a way to build a community with many different types of communities is absolutely paramount. So in my role right now, with the partnerships that we lead, some examples of that are, you may have heard of Afrotech, that's been built by, Blavity, Lesbians Who Tech, right? Digital Undivided is one community that we're working with, National Urban League. So these, all these communities touch millions and millions of people. What we've been doing is working with them to not only build access to opportunity through jobs, you know, career trends, learning different tools that we can do to build up those communities so they have access to economic opportunity. I think there's definitely an opportunity for Moderna, but all companies really, to learn how to tap into those audiences and build strong cultures within their organization, but also with external communities as well.
So I think one of the things, maybe it would be helpful for you to give out your card to the audience so that everyone, because there's so much I didn't know about LinkedIn and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like just chatting with you, I understand so much more about what we could be doing as a company. So thank you for that. And thank you for creating that role. Can you talk a little bit about how you created that role?
Sure.
And then I'm going to kick it over to Kathryn because I have a question for her specifically on
Sure. Yes. Well, I've been in the role for about 7 years. It's gone through several iterations, and we've done also fulfilled several different positions inside of the company. But essentially, this idea came after listening to a fireside chat that Jeff Weiner did. It was in New York. I'm listening to an interview that he's doing for the New York Times. And he's talking about this economic graph concept at LinkedIn. Basically, LinkedIn is building a digital representation of the global workforce, you know, which you think about it, right? So there are 900 million members, there are 50 million companies, there's 120,000 schools like presently now on the platform. And if you think about that, it's a great way to see of new, you know, industries in terms of what skills are needed, how talent is flowing across the globe. Just provides a great picture. And when I heard that, I was, you know, it was almost like goosebumps, right? I was like, these are the types of, this is the type of knowledge that people pay hundreds to be in these types of conversations, to listen to what trends or have exposure to a lot of what influencers say on an everyday basis on LinkedIn. And also, I mean, this is such a great opportunity to include people who have been left out of these conversations. And it's there on the platform for essentially free, right? It's just a matter of being aware that you can tap into, it's more than a job board, but it's a way for you to look ahead and to hear like what's happening in AI, what's happening, you know, in climate change, what are the new hot, and we just released a report about the top jobs for 2023. So anyone can be tapping into that. So that's when I got the idea to say to LinkedIn, you know, who is developing relationships with the largest organizations that are in conversation with these different groups, and how can we cultivate a beautiful collaboration where we're building a network that works for everyone. And so that's how this came to be.
I think that's amazing. So it starts with 4 words: I have an idea, and the next thing you know, you're transforming LinkedIn and how it's being used. And I think Kathryn had an idea as well, or has ideas, but you've been told no a lot. Can you talk a bit? Can you talk about that? Like like how you overcome that, the hurdle and obstacles of being told no?
You know, my ex-husband often would say to me, you know, there's that gene that tells you not to jump off a bridge. It's like, you don't have that. You don't have that. So for me, you know, I don't take no for an answer. And so I don't, and not even no for an answer, I don't ask for permission.
Ask for forgiveness.
I ask for forgiveness. And I think particularly for women, we have a tendency to put ourselves in positions where we're always asking for permission to do stuff, you know, instead of just doing it. We question our intuition, we question the knowledge, and when we should just do it. And so I often do that, and have had experiences in my career where people have told me I couldn't do things, purely because of my gender, my race, what have you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really going to listen to you because I know you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But I mean, there was one particular experience I had. I had entered into one of the early incubator programs in New York City, was one of the only women, was the only person with a tan, even. I won't even say black person, only person with a tan, and got up to do a pitch for the company I was building, which was a beauty company focused on hair for black women. Now, why this is important is black women purchase over 60% of all hair care products in the United States. 60%. We're only about 6% of the US population. The margins on hair care products are amazing. I mean, we're talking 75, 80%, especially once you reach scale and you don't have to worry about packaging and design and stuff like that, right? So this is like an incredible market, right? That is captured, that people are spending money and you don't even have to think about it. So I'm pitching this to a group of VCs, none of whom look like me, but I'm like, but we all like money, so I think you're gonna get it, right? I'm really excited. And so I get up and I pitch it, and the first questions asked of me wasn't about my business model, wasn't about the margins, wasn't about manufacturing, wasn't about how I'm going to scale, wasn't about the supply chain, wasn't about any business, nothing related to business. I was so prepared, right? I went to Yale. Like, I know how to do this. I'm overly prepared. The first question was, and it wasn't a question, it was a statement, is I don't think you can relate to other black women because you have an accountant. And it was, one of my white male colleagues. And I said, well, do tell. I mean, maybe he grew up in Harlem, or I don't know. Maybe he knew something. And he didn't have a reason. He just felt that that was the case. And, it was really difficult for me because I wasn't used to people having no expectations of me. I've been a lifelong overachiever. And this person completely dismissed my ideas for no business or logical reasons. It was just, you can't do it. And it got me thinking, like, well, if someone like me who did everything right, I check all the boxes, went to all the schools, not only went to them, but graduated at the top of my class at these schools, right? Like, not the top black person, one of the top people, period. And you completely dismiss me like that. What happens to everyone else? What happens to people who miss one of the boxes, right? Like, and it was just so striking to me that we could be dismissed that way. I later sold my company the other company I was building, for a lot of money. So, I don't think he has a job now. So, sad for him, but,
So all the reasons you list, they should have listened to you.
Well, you shouldn't listen to me because I'm a woman or person of color. You should listen to me because I'm brilliant, right? Like, yeah. I'm brilliant. I'm a brilliant person who just happens to be a black woman, right? But I'm brilliant. I'm brilliant in every room, regardless who's in it. There's not a qualifier to my brilliance. And I think that's something that people get confused with diversity. They always want to put a qualifier to it. The purpose of diversity is not to give opportunities for people who are not exceptional, who are not at the level. That's not the purpose of diversity. The purpose of diversity is in making sure that we include all brilliant minds, all the brilliant minds. We have some complicated problems right now that we're trying to figure out. We need every smart person in the room. We cannot afford to exclude anybody. We just cannot, because we got to solve these problems. Yeah. We're in the middle of a banking crisis right now in the startup world. We don't have a luxury to exclude and only have certain people in the room, because we need people who have regulatory experience. We need people in government. We need people who have a lot of different experience. And a lot of those people happen to be women, and they happen to be people of color. So we don't have the space. It's in all of our good interests. It's all in all of our best interests to make sure that we have the smartest minds in the room. It's also in our interest to have people who have experience figuring out complex problems. And one of the advantages that I have is that I have to navigate rooms very differently than people who come into rooms who are in rooms where they're immediately accepted. And as a result of that, I've developed certain thought processes that help me to navigate particularly challenging problems quickly. So I can think quickly, and some people call it street smart, some people call it whatever, but I can think quickly how, like if there's a crisis, I can think my way out of that real quickly. And a lot of people who come from diverse communities can. That is an asset to any organization. I'm a mom. There is no one who's a better organizer than moms. I'm telling you, we can do a funny story. In the middle of a banking crisis on Friday, working with our portfolio companies, we have minimal exposure, but everyone in venture is impacted by this. Dealing with friends who are crying, friends of mine at Silicon Valley Bank who lost their jobs, all this other stuff. I get a call from my son's school. I'm at lunch with some of our portfolio companies. My son has a canker sore and is miserable and cannot go to school. Literally, I'm on the phone talking to regulators in California, and I'm like, I'm going to have to call you back. My son's school is calling. And I handled that. I handled my kid. My mother was able to pick him up. And the portfolio companies at the table, all of whom were men, were like, you just literally switched in the middle, mid-sentence, from talking to a California, state regulator on this banking complex issues to talking about canker sores and how to alleviate that. And at the same time, ordering stuff from DoorDash when you're in Austin to be delivered to your home
mother.
in Chicago, right? And they're like, to watch you do that and then switch right back to talking to the regulator.
Amazing.
But think about it this way. Think about the skill set that mothers bring, the ability to be able to handle these complex problems at the same time.
Yeah.
That is a huge asset to your team.
Well, the scary thing is, I think I read somewhere that, yes,
right?
I think I read somewhere that mothers get paid less.
And we get paid less.
Paid less, which is crazy, right?
So I think it's time for us to rethink the discussion around diversity.
Agreed.
And change it to what are the strengths that people who come from diverse backgrounds bring? What are the strengths that moms or people of color or women or even people who come from different geographies, people who come from rural communities? You want to talk about people who understand complex logistics on a very basic level? Talk to someone who grew up in a rural community, in a farming community, and had to figure out how to get some things. I have a friend who grew up in a rural community who's a sneakerhead, and he had this complex system in which he got his sneaker. I mean, it was really impressive. From a logistics standpoint, I'm like, you thought this really out. But think about the value of people who come from these diverse experiences and what they bring to your team.
Yeah, and I want to hear from you also, Jacqueline. But I think this unconscious bias that you're bringing up is a huge issue in companies, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much in what you said, so many nuggets, insights. One thing that, I have to give my company some props around the way we have really built out our diversity, inclusion, and belonging program, that we've invested so much money in making sure that we're creating an environment of belonging for people. So to Kathryn's point, making sure our management team and leaders within the organizations are trained to lead an inclusive environment, to look for the strengths in others, to look for those people who bring to the table, so you're able to see everyone's brilliance, so everyone has an environment not only they belong but they thrive, right? The other thing too that is important is that you're a leader that taps the intelligence of your team and really creates that structure so that you're able to have that where people are respected in that environment, right? And that's something that we definitely need to create more of. Yeah. Accountability, for instance, that's something that you asked about before. Making sure that our top leaders are dedicated to it. Right. Also, Kathryn, what you also hinted on too is it's not only thought about as diversity is not for just the diversity department, right? it's something that impacts what you also refer to as a business imperative. So it has to be a part of the culture. Right?
Yeah.
And also you're thinking about it from a standpoint of how's it affecting marketing? How's it affecting business? Like, how's making sure that employees, everything is really thought of as, it belongs to other parts of the business as well.
Right. And how do you know you're doing it well? Like, you put metrics together and say, we're going to make sure we hire this many people and diverse. Like, that isn't measuring it. So how do you measure that you're actually making a difference in terms of your hiring practices, how you're engaging people, how you're bringing them in? Like, how's that measured?
I would say Jackie just is a perfect example of how it's measured, right? How do your employees talk about you when you're not in the room? I mean, so you have the metrics and numbers, and that's all great and good, but how do they talk about you when you're not there? How do they talk about you when they don't have to talk about you? Right? Like, I think that's like how you sort of measure it. And as a company, you can hear sentiment. You can measure sentiment, right? You can hear what the buzz is, the word of mouth is about your company. You can get that. And so having an employee like, Jackie say such great things about the company, that's really how you measure.
Yeah. And there's standard metrics around, of course, hiring, but also engagement metrics, NPS scores, how people are feeling, how they're, how much they're engaging. So there are many different types, but I think the most important is really making sure you have that executive buy-in and that our leaders are actually owning those statistics, right? So have lots of acknowledgement for our leadership. We have a great, have to definitely acknowledge the leadership that I have. I'm very grateful for it. And our boss, Rosanna Duruthi, actually leads globally our diversity, inclusion, and belonging program, has done an amazing job. And also, too, just the buy-in of our CEOs and all that, you just have to have that. And to Kathryn's point, when all those metrics and all those systems have been put in place, it's always a continuous process, but that's when you really get people saying great things about your company, when they actually see and it's actually reflected in the culture of the company, and it's throughout. So you can't pretend that stuff, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
No.
So I'm gonna switch gears slightly because I want your opinion on, and maybe just name 2 or 3 each. Who are change makers that you admire other than each other? Because I know you love each other. And why? What makes you think, wow, that's a person that's really changing the world, and these are the reasons why? Maybe it's just one that comes to mind.
I'm going to brag on a couple of our portfolio companies. And the reason why, I'm not only because I'm an investor in them, but they're really tackling problems that are large and complicated and sticky, and they started tackling these problems before anyone really knew. So one of our companies that we invested in is called Yumi Health. It is a child mental health telemedicine platform for children who are on Medicaid Advantage. We are in the middle of a child mental health crisis right now. And why Hafiza Muhammad, who is the brilliant founder of it, why it's so interesting is she originally created it to address challenges for children who lived in urban communities. She soon quickly discovered that the same challenges that children in urban communities face, there is not enough pediatric mental health practitioners, is the same problem children in rural communities also face too. So her 2 biggest states right now is Maryland and the state of Oregon. So here is a problem that a Black woman created to really address challenges in urban communities that is a solution for a lot of children, many of whom are not African American. And I think that's another thing. When I first started our fund in 2020, people thought, oh, that's just diversity inclusion, it's impact investing. And I said the problems that urban communities face are also faced by other communities. The opiate crisis in the crisis in terms of drug addiction happened in African American and urban communities first in the 1980s with the crack cocaine epidemic. There is solutions that were created out of these communities that also will help folks in Appalachian, right, in West Virginia and other places too. We do not live in a vacuum. These challenges do not just impact one group, it impacts all of us. Another company that we've invested in is called Juno Medical. It is a primary care platform. They have 2 locations, well, actually 4 now, across the U.S., and they're opening 10 more by the end of this year. Now, what makes Juno so amazing is that they center the chief medical decision maker in your family, which is moms. So if you go into their primary care facilities, on one side is pediatrics, on the other side is primary care women's health. Now, why that is brilliant is, as a mom, it is hell having to schedule the 50 billion different doctor's appointments and try to manage the schedule along with being a working mom and along with all these things. At Juno, in a 2-hour time period, I can get my checkup. I can get both my primary care as well as my women's health checkup. I can get all my labs. So can my son. I can even schedule it for my mother and my partner, the entire family within a 2-hour time period. It's done. All our checkups, all in one location. That is brilliant, right? That's a type of solution that is
Are
revolutionary.
they opening in Boston?
Actually, we should talk, Moderna. Let's make it happen.
Let's talk.
But that's so I bring those 2 up, and there's other companies that we've invested in as well. We're an LP in funds, and so we have funds that are rethinking capital, investing in terms of revenue-based financing and different ways that capital can flow within communities. These are tools that can be used by everyone. And I think those are the people who I'm most excited about. Those are the change makers I'm most excited about, is these people who are coming up with like brilliant ways of rethinking things and how we do things.
Well, they're solving for something you didn't know. Like, you just assumed this was the system.
But every mom, it's not just mom, every dad, any dad who's had to like struggle with taking your kids to a bunch of appointments, you know how great it would be if everybody could just do everything at once, right? Any parent, and not even a parent, but imagine if you're a caregiver for an older family member, right? You might even have children, but you're a caregiver. You can get your appointment and the person you're caring for appointment at the same time. Like, so it's cutting down the amount of time, right? And we all don't have a lot of time. And of course it's a problem.
Right.
But unless you are a person of color, unless you're a mom, you might not even recognize that it's a problem, right? You might not even think it's a problem. But it is. And how many people have that challenge, right?
It's terrible. Yeah. By the way, I can see why you're really good at your job. I'm throwing all my money at you to invest in all the different funds.
Please do. We're starting fund
She's
too.
so good.
We'd love to have Moderna. I'm
Okay.
Modernerd.
You're
so
Modernerd.
I'm
She's
Modernerd,
created a new
so
verb.
let's
I'm
do it.
stealing it totally. This is amazing. Okay, Jacqueline, changemaker you admire.
Oh my
Or
gosh,
2.
there's so many. I can talk about the qualities that I really admire in
Absolutely.
changemakers, and hopefully people will hear themselves in this as well. I think people that can really tap the brilliance of their community are people that people who are inspire you so that they can tap the brilliance, or is one definitely. Another are people that they're system sinkers. They really think about how to change the system itself. Like, they take on problems a lot larger than themselves, are also people that I admire. People who definitely inspire collaboration, right? Those are some of the types of people that I like to follow and who I admire a lot. I mean, there are just so many from you.
Yeah, it's hard to pin down
one
just
to
a
pick.
couple. Unless you're investing in a few companies.
Right.
You want to make sure people know what they do. Then you can pin a few down.
I think one of my favorite, though, I would say, I mean, a lot of people pick her, but Michelle Obama is somebody I admire for getting some people inspired, getting people to think as a community, take on tough challenges. That's definitely somebody that springs out to me.
And I would say friends too. And
Yeah.
I know we keep talking about community, but I always think I can't stress the importance of your community and the people you surround yourself with, and how important that will be to your own personal success and growth as a human being,
Well,
and being very intentional about who's in your space.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
like Jackie and I have been friends forever. I have another great friend, Changemaker Kendra Bracken Ferguson, who's in the audience too. She's also a venture capitalist. And just having people in your space who want you to win and who are helping you, but who will also kind of tell you about yourself when you're not living up to your expectations, right? When you're maybe not reaching your best, you're not being your highest and your best, right? And someone who can say, I know you at your highest and your best, and this is not it. Having that community around you, is so important, and I have such respect and admiration for my community because I wouldn't be here without those people. I just wouldn't be here without my community.
Go ahead.
I was just saying everything happens through people. As a leader, I think your job is to define what, how is sort of comes from your community. I don't worry about how, because if I think about how, I'll limit myself in terms of like what their brilliance and what they can bring. So I hope you're getting this message here. Like, your job is to think of the unique message, to communicate that, to be the inspiration, and just surround yourself with the people who can bring the resources and the thought and the magic to it.
And I also think finding someone, colleagues to help ignite, to kind of tell you, co-conspirators to tell you, you should do this, you should do that, you should bring that up, you should use your voice in the meeting, don't be so quiet, don't be afraid. Like, someone who can kind of spur you along to ignite change and give you the confidence also that you need. So you need like those colleagues to support and surround you, and also be that person for others, I think, as well, because you can't do it on your own. And I think sometimes you think, well, the first time a good idea actually flies, you get that confidence and say, you know what, I have bigger ideas and I can change. I can create a new job for myself, which I've actually asked people at work to do. Said, well, I would like to do something in this area. We'll write the job description. Bring me the job description, and we'll create that job. Let's look at what that could be. So the change is within you as well, I think. And sometimes we wait for that moment, that opportunity, and that opportunity is never just going to pop in your lap. It's like you guys showed, you grabbed it, you went for it, and you said, I have an idea, I'm going to go for it. So we all need to think like that in order to really ignite change. That's my belief. So,
and I do think change comes, people do change. I think we forget that. People do change, and sometimes it's just one person that can ignite change. Like, I was talking to someone yesterday about, the 10X engineer. Like, everybody, in startup tech, about the 10X engineer, right? It's the person that does the job of 10 other engineers, right? They're the fastest coder. They can do the best code, the cleanest code. Their GitHub is like the bomb, like all of that. And I think we also have to invest in 10X people, right? There are people for whom investing in them creates thousands of other folks. It creates this ripple effect at scale, right? And so it's as changemakers, I think of like our 10X people or 100X people, right? They're the ones who like go out and do it, and then everyone else is like, oh, I think I can do it now too. Or I see that, okay, yeah, let me go do that as well. And making sure as organizations, whether you're in LinkedIn or Moderna, or me as a investor, that I'm really searching for those 10X, 100X people who are going to create this sort of ripple effect of change.
Mm-hmm. Can you... in your book, can you tell me a little bit about what and I'm going to put a plug in for your businesses in your book, but what is the most surprising thing that people will learn when they read your book?
So my book, Build a Damn Thing, available on Amazon.
Because I think there's a lot of change in there. Yeah, you can talk about that.
3 weeks on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. Prologue by Guy Kawasaki. The most interesting thing that has come, so 2 things. The subtitle is, how to build a successful company when you're not a rich white guy. And what has been interesting is how many rich white guys love the book. Like, like, we received a major endorsement from Steve Case. Also from one of our limited partners in our fund is Andrew Bosworth, who's the CTO of Facebook. I mean, like, these are, Bracken Darrell, the CEO of Logitech. Like, these are like the richest white guys, like, love the book. And the reason why they say they do is, as investors, there were things that they need to share with companies that they've invested in who are not like them, and they didn't have the words to do it. They didn't know how to say what needed to be said. And they were like, all we do now is just buy your book and give it to them because you say it in a way that we can't. And I said, that's great, because you know what? You don't need to know how to say it, because I do. So buy lots of my books and we all win. So that's been funny thing. And I love that. I love that when I talk to them and they share that. The other thing is how by you being yourself, you give other people permission to be themselves as well. I am always myself. Anyone who's known me knows I've always been this way.
Have to.
No matter where I'm at, if I'm at the White House or, like, it doesn't matter. I'm like always Kathryn. I always show up fully as me. And when you do that, you give other people permission to do that themselves too. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at a Women in Venture conference. It's like the big Women in Venture conference. All the women you can think of in venture capital, Eileen Lee's, all the biggest names, right? And everyone, day one, was like dressed in like these buttoned up, they were like, they had Patagonia vests and like Allbirds. And it was like, khaki jean, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, we're women. We don't have to do this. So then I gave my talk, and of course I'm like, dressed in, I don't know, like a Prada dress. And I had like some bright silver Air Force Ones on stage. And someone got up in the audience and she was like, I just have to thank you for wearing your shoes. I mean, we're talking business, structure of venture fund, all this. And she's like, I have to thank you because my feet has been hurting this whole entire time wearing these shoes. And because of you wearing your shoes, now I have permission to go put my sneakers on. So I'm going upstairs to put my sneakers on right now. And then the next day at the conference, everybody had sneakers on, right? And we were all comfortable. And when I say, and those of us who've ever wore like tight shoes or heels, and it like messes up your like disposition a bit. When I say the energy completely changed when everybody was comfortable in like comfortable shoes. But that was like by being myself. And I think that's one of the big things that come out of the book. It becomes this ripple effect, right? You yourself, and then everyone else gets permission to be themselves, and then they give permission to other people to be themselves. And then we have this environment where we can start to collaborate and really start to figure out solutions to some of these problems.
Yeah, my old boss used to say, be yourself, everyone else is taken. Yeah. And I thought, yeah, that's true.
Those are some really cute shoes you have on.
Those are great shoes.
Like, yes.
But we really saw that in the pandemic too, right? And where there was such a call for authenticity. Authenticity as far as what you expect in your environment, your ability to what you could say at work, and that all translates into amazing productivity with people, right? You're getting that. And now talent is demanding that in order to step into an environment to work. Like, you have to have that authentic environment.
Yeah.
Right?
I think about, you're talking about a work environment where women are wearing shoes, and I think, having parties and meetings, and it's so wonderful to be back. And yet not everybody is fully back. And I think about my kids. I have a 25-year-old, 23-year-old. They don't have anybody to mentor them because the boss, I guess the senior people back, but not the direct managers. And so I worry about the next generation, like where they're going to learn to, take a risk, use their voice. Who are the mentors for them?
So I think those of us who are old heads, as my son said to me, you're sassy like Beyonce, but old. He's 7. I was like, I'll take that. I think we have to rethink platforms and how we interact with those who are younger, and we need to go to where they're at. There is this generational divide of people not wanting to be on TikTok and not wanting to be on Instagram.
I'm on TikTok.
No, see, but you also have fabulous shoes. So that makes sense, right? but like not wanting to be on these platforms or not being comfortable being on these platforms where young people are at. So they're getting their advice and mentorship through these platforms, right? They're looking at Instagram and getting advice on life and business and how to navigate the space. They're on TikTok looking at TikToks that give business advice and things like that. We need to be there too. Like we need to be where they're at. Instead of asking them to go back 20 years to how we used to run things or how things were, or even not 20 years, 3 years or 4 years ago where things were structured a certain way, like go to them and they're on these platforms.
Well, also too, I'm glad you brought up that question about the different, like, meeting people where they are. That's definitely key. I mean, we found, one of the key learning lessons after 12 million people have self-identified on LinkedIn to say what, race, LGBT, the different, sexual. And we find that 27% of Latinx women, as well as 23% of Black women, are now applying to more jobs online.
That's great.
Right? So hybrid is definitely playing a role, but also just to say, it's not just happening in the workplace. I think that now that we have to definitely make a concerted effort to meet people in many different places, whether that be online, in work, and then also too, it's different generationally. I think in terms of who's actually, how do we plug in to meeting people where they are.
I think it's this thing to jump in. I was in a discussion with economic leaders in the city of Chicago, and there was a lot of like folks who, I won't say they're small businesses technically, but not small businesses. They like employ hundreds of people. And they were just going on and on lamenting like how nobody wants to work for us. No one wants to come to work. It was like really being negative towards millennial and Gen Z. And I was like, you have to understand that they don't want to work for you.
Right.
Like, you have to rethink this idea of work. And for so long, for 100 years, right, it was, I'm the job creator and you need me. I mean, that I'm simplifying, but that's really how we were told, right? The job creators were the ones that ran things, right? They were the ones that dictated the rules. And they were the ones that were in position of power. And we're in the middle, not even the middle, I think we're towards the end of a massive shift in that, where the power is no longer with the job creators, quote unquote, or the C-suite. It's with the people who are actually doing the work. They have a lot of power now. So as a leader, you have to ask yourself, why does someone want to work for me? Why do they want to come and work here now? Because they have options. People can create their own companies. They have people like me who invest in them to do so, right? They don't have to work for you anymore. And I think that is the generational challenge I see of like, because almost everyone, I was the youngest person. I'm 46. I was the youngest person in the room. I was like, y'all got to do something about this. But they were just like, oh, and I'm like, they don't have to work for you. Do you understand? An example I give, if you were a young Black or Latino kid growing up in the west side of Chicago, prior to maybe 5 years ago, if you didn't graduate from high school, your job options were limited. You had to work retail, and you may have been making $7 an hour with no benefits, no nothing, right? Fast forward, we have the creator economy. We have TikTok, we have Instagram, and we have creators who are making, $1,000, $2,000 a week talking about products, right? So that little $200 a week they would have made working for you, fast food company, no benefits, no nothing, getting bad feet, bad back, acne because they're over a fryer. They can then create their own mini company, not even mini, they have their own companies in which they are making 4 to 5 times more a week, hanging out with their friends and having fun. Why the hell would they want to work for you? Like, what is the upside to them? And one of the things that I love about younger generations is that they really understand and know how to like think about their upside. which I think is just brilliant, right? Like you have these like if you don't know an 18 or 19 or 20-year-old, or you have kids and you know this, you need to sit down and talk with them about how they think about upside. I was not there.
Their world is a different world, but I think, and we only have a few seconds left, but I think I was going to ask you what are you most excited about in terms of change, but I do think the next generation and what they're doing and how they're showing up in the world is super exciting, and I'm inspired by them. Even though my children do drive me crazy, I still am inspired by how they take on the world, and I think they're going to be the next gen of real change makers. And so I just want to thank you both for your time today. You were fantastic. And a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. What a pleasure it was chatting with you. Thank you, ladies.